Does anyone have any comments for the board? Hearing nothing. Okay, so we're going to move to our agenda items. And can I get a motion to approve the resolution 250402 of adoption for the Shiawassee County 2024 Local Hazard Mitigation Plan as presented?
So moved.
Support.
Do we have discussion?
Yeah, it's a couple of things that I would like to turn it over to Trent Atkins, who is our emergency manager. But briefly, this is a plan that has to be done every so many years and turned into the state. It allows us to be compliant to receive certain grant funding mechanisms from the state, but also is the plan of how we are supposed to respond in the event of certain emergencies. And so beginning in December of 2022, we began working on this plan. And Trent picked up this plan when he was hired last year and has since finished it. Okay. Sure.
Hi, my name is Trent Atkins. For the ones I've not had a chance to meet, I'm the emergency manager for the county. So the hazard mitigation plan, I think everybody has a copy of the executive summary that I put together. It is 4 pages, but the actual plan is a couple hundred pages, so I thought I'd slim this down for you. So the hazard mitigation plan is required by the federal government, by FEMA. It actually helps us to satisfy the requirements of the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. It's not only for emergency management, but it also helps us with our eligibility for all federal grants, whether it's law enforcement or it's public works or whatever the case. A lot of times they look back to see if we have a hazard mitigation plan for our community. And it does really 2 things. We take a look at our community to look at what our risk is, whether it's a man-made risk or a weather risk or whatever the case may be. It helps us to manage that risk. And then also it gives us eligibility for grant funding, and then also during a disaster for some disaster response recovery funding that may be available as well. This particular effort for the hazard mitigation plan, it was done as a collaborative process. We had representatives throughout county government, as well as we had a number of local municipalities that participated. Some of the key elements of putting the plan together here, I've got them outlined. We had public and stakeholder outreach via some meetings and online surveys. As normal, we didn't have a lot of response from the public, but we did have enough to give us some feedback. Integration of planning equity to include underserved communities. We wanted to make sure we were looking at the social aspects as well as some of the other aspects of the community as well. We looked at the hazard risk and the vulnerability assessment. So when we look at hazard, we look at what are the potential hazards within the community. As an example, an earthquake typically is not a hazard within our community, but believe it or not, we could have heavy winds and tornadoes, right? I mean, we do see that from time to time, and so we take a look at that and what our vulnerability is, and we actually come up with an equation based on what type of things we've done to reduce the risk to those hazards and come out with what our vulnerability is. We look at a capabilities assessment, and we get jurisdictional input from those capabilities assessments, and we review some of our current and previous mitigation efforts. In the next section here of this summary, you can see some of the things that we took a look at, specifically flooding, severe weather, tornadoes, droughts, extreme heat, and severe weather storms. Those were some of the significant things that we identified as the top of the list to what the hazards and vulnerabilities we really have within our county.
Earthquakes low, winds high.
Yes, exactly.
It
Things
happens,
that you
both
would
are bad.
normally see, right?
Yeah, both are bad.
Yes,
So
both are bad.
could I ask a question, or so these hazards that we're looking at are all weather related?
Yeah, a lot of the other things that we had, I mean, we're a very rural community, so a number of the man-made hazards that you would normally see were very low on the list. So we took the very high vulnerable issues that we would face here in a rural community, which are typically weather. The things that were listed. Yeah, the derailments, they weren't real high, only because we don't have a big history of it, right? We have enough mitigation strategy and resources in place that when that does happen, usually the response is very quick and adequate to any type of derailment. Now, does that mean that we couldn't have a catastrophic event? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that our risk is very low within our communities.
So do we look at any, any other, say another pandemic or a very large shooting or, something? Do those things, even though the risk is low,
Yeah.
do they come into?
So the process is actually, the process has been a year long, and we did hire a consultant, Bold Planning, which they are experts in hazard mitigation planning as well as community risk assessment. We looked at a number of hazards, including cyber attacks, man-made threats, derailments, over-the-road hazardous materials spills, things like that. And a number of things go into that assessment. You look at historically what we've had, you look at what the impact has been to the community, you look at what the current community capabilities are, and then what the outcomes have been. And so there's a numeric value given to that, there's an equation that goes into that assessment. And so you kind of rank what that risk is, right? And so when we looked at it, the weather risk was really the highest to us because we're very rural, right? And we know from living in this area that we have tornadoes, we have high wind incidents, we have ice storms, we have large snowstorms, we have extreme heat. We've seen droughts. Maybe not to the point that you would see maybe in in other parts of the country, but we've seen some significant shortages of rainfall that have impacted our farmers and potentially could impact the water table and things like that. And so we looked at what some of those higher level risks are to our community that perhaps either we can reduce the risk by just taking a few extra steps and measures to reduce it, or that we just are not really prepared for. And I'll explain that in just a minute.
Okay.
So again, we looked at the likelihood, the severity, and the potential impact on those. Our mitigation goals obviously are to protect people, property, and critical facilities. That was really our key to promote sustainability, development, and resilience within our community, to educate and engage the public on mitigation efforts, which is huge. I've been in emergency management and public safety for 35 years now, and I can tell you, educating the public on what their risk is and helping them to understand the things that they can do to reduce the impact of risk on their lives can go a long way. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a disaster or an emergency in their life to get them to move that ball towards reducing that risk, but at least getting that information out there, they know where to find it. And we actually do a pretty good job on our website, and we provide a lot of information to the public now. And then to strengthen emergency planning and interagency coordination. And we have a very strong interagency coordination between police, fire, emergency management, public works, planning in this community within the county, much better than other communities that I've worked at in the past. And just to identify some of the participating agencies, obviously Shiawassee County, the City of Durant, City of Langsburg, City of Owasso, City of Perry, and Perry Township. Now I will tell you that every jurisdiction received a communications from me inviting them to participate in this process, but these were the only jurisdictions that chose to participate. So that's why they're on the list. Now, does that mean that the plan doesn't cover the other jurisdictions? No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that they're not eligible for funding. These are just the jurisdictions that chose to actively participate in the planning process itself. So the next thing, and this is probably the more interesting part of the plan for you guys, in section 80 of the plan, these are kind of the action items, right? And these were the ones specifically for the county, and these are things that, you know, whether we run out and do these, or we look at these and go, yep, these are things that we've started, we can do a better job at, or as we look at, you know, future purchases and budgeting, we should probably consider. These are not have-to-haves. These are things that we should consider in the future. And I'll just run through a few of these. Obviously, installing generators at county facilities are very important. We saw that last week. We had to shut county government down for a day because not all facilities had generators. Probably something that we should consider in the future as we look at budgeting is how do we overcome that additional support for generation.
And before we go down that path, I do have an update for you guys on some of that tomorrow that I'll give in my administrator's update.
Yeah, and again, these things are not crisis mode type of responses. I just want to make you guys aware of that. These are strictly from the planning process, things that would help us to reduce long-term risk. You know, continuing to conduct hazard education. We do that now, but continuing to do that. Enforcing building codes. Again, we do that now, but you know, looking at things like you know, when we build buildings, and obviously the county's, you know, not in a position where we're running out and building buildings, but you know, building buildings that have some protection against high winds, you know, creating safe spaces, you know, for tornadoes, or you know, for maybe violent events where, you know, people can protect themselves, things like that. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Xeriscaping for public properties, looking at how do we do landscaping that doesn't require watering plants, so that during times of drought or low water table, we're not impacting that more by increasing the use of water.
You have noticed we went to a lot of stone around the courthouse. It's a remodel.
Well, and
You look like you had
weeds
a
too.
question, I'm sorry.
No,
Weeds
I'm
always grow.
just listening. I have a question after it, but no.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, looking at low flow toilets and faucets, modernizing HVAC in facilities, designating heating and cooling centers, which we do every year. We look at heating and cooling centers, you know, when there's extreme heat and extreme cold. We have a list of those. Usually they're public facilities that are already open anyways, but we keep that dialogue open with them every year. Looking at the National Flood Insurance protection, because we do have some floodplain area within our community, encouraging the purchase of the NFIP flood insurance by residents. You know, as grants become available, whether it's the BRIC grant or another grant, buy and demolish flood-prone properties if there's properties in that floodplain, and the money's available to buy those properties, buy them, demolish it, and not allow building on that property. Again, reducing that risk to now the flooding to those properties. Looking at, you know, building detention and retention ponds, putting flood hazard signage, making that available to be able to put up, enforcing no build zones in floodplains, installing surge protectors, you know, in county buildings for all of our critical infrastructure, using hail resistant roofing where we can, building the community safe rooms, we kind of mentioned that. Upgrading our weather alert systems and NOAA radios. At one time, we did have NOAA radios in most of the offices. I believe that they're still there. We do encourage everyone to have a weather app on their phone. Our siren system in the county is not where it should be countywide. That's not a county issue. That's typically a local issue. There's just not federal funding the way there used to be to purchase sirens. Used to be every year you could get enough federal funding to put sirens up in the communities. It's just not available anymore. And so, you know, we continue to look at those efforts, but so in the meantime, we encourage people to try to have an app on their phone or to make sure that they're certainly aware of the weather impacts that they may be faced with. Insulating water lines and looking at upgrading the water sirens. And so those are kind of the recommendations we're making in the plan. And then as far as ongoing maintenance and implementation, this is something that we will review annually looking at what we've done to implement mitigation strategies, update the plan, and then every 5 years we have to go through this process again. That's a requirement for us. We're going to track it, and then obviously, you know, as the board requires, I can be back up here to report annually on, you know, whatever type of progress that we've made. So that's kind of what we're looking at. The next step, we've got the plan written. The state's approved it. FEMA has read through it. They've approved it. They were the final step in that process, and now it's up to the board. We just have to have a resolution signed. We add that to the plan, and we start to move forward. So,
I just have a couple quick questions
Absolutely.
here. And you had mentioned, I mean, I love, obviously it's a great process, and thank you for your work and your team's work, but just had a question about, it says obviously zero cost to this. Obviously the items have costs, but is the training or the certification?
So there was a grant that we received to actually do the plan. So it was zero cost to us that we received in 2022.
That's right.
And then it was finally paid out, thankfully in part to Representative DeGole, because when we had looked at it originally for reimbursement, they said they didn't have any money, but we managed to get paid.
Perfect. No, that's great. And I know, I think you kind of answered this because you said some of the communities that you reached out to didn't respond. If in the future they do want to join in, does that increase their cost, or is it already kind of settled with that grant?
No, there's no impact one way or
Okay.
the other. You know, the communities that participated, we were able to collect their data. That's really the impact that it had on the process. If there's a disaster in a community that didn't participate, they're still eligible for funding. You know, the only difference is we didn't have a good picture of their community to be able to say, here's some recommendations specifically for your community.
Okay.
The recommendations that we went through, all of the communities that were listed, the plan actually has specific recommendations to them based on their community. So
Okay,
if you go through the whole plan, you'll see that. In fact, the whole plan is up on the emergency management website, so you can thumb through that. I caution you to printing it out. It's several hundred pages.
We'll go through a few reams.
So all of you did receive the email version of it,
Yes,
but
yeah.
so that you could have it to review, and we printed out a couple of snippets for you for discussion.
And thank you for the work on this. It's
You're
very
welcome.
thorough, and we appreciate it. So,
Yeah.
thanks.
Is the CERT team included in this plan too?
No, and the county no longer has a CERT team.
Or,
Just to be real brief, there was a lack of membership, and so unfortunately the CERT team disbanded about 6 months ago.
so with the sheriff, you have taken the responsibility of search and rescue for children or adults or whatever?
It
So
will include the posse.
yeah, so the posse's involved, but there's also several qualified search and rescue teams in the area that are called in when it's a large search event.
the resolution bind us to carrying out these are just suggested actions?
Or just suggestions. The resolution just provides that we have done the plan, we have completed the plan, and we've gone through all of the steps required under law, including public hearings, meetings, and to discuss the data collection, etc.
Okay.
That's all.
Bureaucratic nirvana.
Any further comments about it, or questions?
Okay, on here.
So was it Brad that we had a motion? So, we can vote, do we have a support for the motion?
I supported it,
I'm
yep.
sorry, it was Cindy, yep, okay. So, let's go for a vote on that, right? Do we need a,
No.
No, just
just voice? Oh, okay, alright. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Alright, motion passes. We have our last call to the public. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or statements? Alright. And the Public Safety and Courts Committee is adjourned.